Next, we'll look at punishment and specifically the development of the connection between unfairness and punishment. We'll look at some early strategic moralistic punishment, and we'll look at this in the context of the work that we've covered so far and in previous lectures. Everything we covered on inequity aversion has dealt with situations in which an individual's self-interest is in conflict with their desire to invest in others. However, in our everyday lives, it's not always the case that we're directly involved in allocation conflicts. Sometimes we witness these kinds of conflicts between two people. When we witness these kinds of conflicts between two people played out in other people, we face a choice about whether or not we're going to intervene. When do children start intervening, start punishing unfairness? Let's look at adults. A great deal of work has shown that adults are willing to punish uncooperative individuals, even when they're not personally affected, and even when it's really costly for themselves. Indeed, it's thought that third-party punishment may play an important role in promoting norms of cooperative behavior in human societies. We touched upon some of this in the discussion of evolution with Joe Henrich's work. How does third-party punishment in adults come about? When does that connection between unfairness and punishment emerge? There's some evidence using the ultimatum game suggesting that it emerges gradually over childhood. Remember, in the ultimatum game, the recipient of the allocation gets to reject low allocations, essentially punishing the allocator because the rejection means they both get nothing. Researchers have studied when children start rejecting allocations in order to track the emergence of punishment for unfairness when they're the victim. And they find that young 45-year-old children, they actually accept everything in the ultimatum game. They're not rejecting allocations. Older children, age 6 to 8, that's when they start to reject allocations, about half the time. So younger and older kids are doing different kinds of thinking when they receive low unfair allocations. Those younger kids treat the reward in a straightforward, self-focused way. What's good for me is good for me, no matter what you get. But older kids, they're rejecting low unfair offers, and they're also starting to make more fair offers. So this really indicates that they understand fairness norms, and they anticipate punishment if they themselves are unfair. And this suggests an emergence of strategic reasoning for the best outcome, which entails giving fair offers and rejecting poor offers. So given the role of third-party punishment in adult cooperation, it's really important to ask, when does third-party punishment emerge during development? Researchers have studied this, and I'm going to tell you about an experiment involving witnessing allocations, where the child participant makes a decision to accept or reject allocations that will not affect themselves, but an absent divider and an absent recipient. So let's look at this. The method involved 32 5-year-olds and 32 6-year-olds, so we're looking at the 5 to 6-year-old age range. The participant, again, makes decisions on behalf of two absent children, the divider and the recipient. The divider divides 6 Skittles between themselves and the recipient. And that's what the participant is witnessing as the third party. And the participant has the power to accept those allocations that were handed out by the divider to the two of them, or reject those allocations. Rejection is the punishment, essentially, as the children will not get any of the Skittles. And they incorporated a cost manipulation to make this rejection behavior costly for the participant child or cost-free. and I'll explain that in a moment. So this is the apparatus, and the child basically stood behind that lever there and observed different kinds of allocations, like 3, 3, and so on. And this was an in-person experiment, and you can see that there's holders to accommodate Skittles and to move them across the board. Here's a schematic of the apparatus set up with the decider, the divider, and the recipient both absent, and the participant behind the lever. The child in the study is the participant observing the split of Skittles and will decide whether it's fair, whether to accept or reject it. Rejecting being the analog to third-party punishment. Here's the apparatus schematic set up with the decider and the recipient with a fair split, 3-3. The child in the study, behind the lever, observes a fair split and can decide whether to accept or reject this allocation. If the child pulls the green lever or toward the green direction, each child that's absent receives their allocation. This indicates that the child participant accepts the fair distribution. For the same sort of distribution, the child could also pull the lever toward the red side. Pulling the lever toward the red side punishes the decider and the recipient because, in that case, neither receives anything. The schematics you just viewed involve the participant pulling the lever to the green side to accept or the red side to reject a fair, equal distribution. In total, the children observed 12 trials. 6 of them were that equal distribution, where it was 3 for the decider and 3 for the recipient. There were 6 trials that were selfish, though. And in those trials, the decider kept everything, all 6, and gave nothing. And the child participant had to view that and decide what to do. You might think, well, how is this child really going to be invested here? They don't have any Skittles in the game, if you will. So what they did was introduce a cost manipulation, and they gave that child a 25 Skittle endowment, and they could take home all 25 Skittles. So it was costly to punish in one condition, and that meant if they punished, they decided to pull toward the red, they had to put a Skittle in the red box, and that red box would be kept at the lab, and they wouldn't get to take those Skittles home. And everything they accepted, they could put a Skittle in the green box, and they would take home the entire green box. In the free condition, the non-costly condition, anytime they rejected or accepted, they simply put a Skittle in the box and they could take home the entire box.